These people seemed so strange. They didn't blend with the wilderness, but feared it, holding it at a safe distance, like a man handling a deadly snake. They had no regard for the land, animals, plants, or even water. Litter was freely tossed. Live trees and brush were carelessly cut from around the dwellings. Unnamable waste was everywhere. These men were worse than their domesticated animals, living in their own filth, having no other purpose, it seemed, than to fatten and die. Laughter was usually drunken and at the expense of others. Otherwise, there was none. The faces of this village looked so pained and distorted with sadness that grandfather wondered what directed these lives into this septic existence. So many questions filled his head. Why did they wear heavy clothes against the reality of nature? Why did they cloister themselves in sterile houses, rush about so aimlessly, or take such great time and care with simple processes of survival? Their lust for comfort, security, and safety seemed almost barbaric. It was foreign to grandfather's thinking that anyone could consciously insulate themselves so lavishly from the wilderness and life itself. We are tuned in to fitness and consciousness. That's from Tom Brown Jr., his book called Grandfather. He has a famous book called The Tracker. That's probably his most well-known book. I read that a long time ago, and I read some other of his books on tracking. And I just started reading Grandfather a few days ago. I got several of his books from the library again. Today's episode, sometimes I just don't have a name picked out, and then today's episode is called, and then I don't even know what it's called. Let's call it The Elders. So what do we do to become an elder? It says in Grandfather that when Stalking Wolf, that was grandfather's name that he earned, his family, his tribe were calling him grandfather even when he was in his 20s, because he was so advanced as learning the skills of the scouting, survival, all of this kind of thing. So he became an elder when he was young. And there was a Wim Hof quote that I liked. And it was just something like, "We are the elders. Someone has to do it." So I think, well, what can I do to help? What can I do to help keep this train running on time? And what am I doing here? What's important for me to do? And one of the things that I like to do is connect people. Of course, I'm a trainer. I started as a trainer in 1999. And so, of course, I like helping people through that. And it's not just like, oh, yeah, now you have bigger biceps, or now you weigh 20 pounds less or 30 pounds less. Or now you can press a heavier weight over your head, because that's really important. Well, it is important. And it's not. It is and it isn't. I think it's awesome. I love pressing heavy weights over my head. I think it's great. It's not the most important thing, though, but it kind of is. Depends how you think about it. So with my training, I try to tap into more. Like, I'm not giving my clients spiritual lectures and this kinds of thing. But part of it is like the music that I play. I'm not just playing like workout music and like the typical kinds of workout music. There's, I think you would say, I don't know what kind of music you would say it is, but there's Grateful Dead on there. There's Pink Floyd. There's African drumming and Native American drumming and all kinds of, I guess, music from all over the world. And some of it might be like slow, and so if you think if somebody's expecting like this upbeat kind of thing, it's not always what I play. Some of it is. There's the Rocky soundtrack songs on my playlist. There's over 400 songs on the playlist that I use, and I add to it somewhat regularly. I was just reading. I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw Brian Rose from London Real had a video, and I saw the caption of it first, and it said something like why he quit drinking completely. And it had been a year and a half since like New Year's Eve, a year and a half ago, that he quit drinking. And it's by like a 5-minute video on Instagram. And he was talking about being able to like serve others. He's like getting drunk and that kind of stuff. It's fun at the time, but you're not doing anybody else any favors. And then like the next day, maybe you're hungover or whatever, and you can't really help people do stuff. So it's like he's going at it. It's like a selfish thing to do. And he runs into some challenges sometimes. The challenges of temptation. And I could relate to that, not in, I don't have a lot of temptation. I quit drinking almost 7 years ago. I'm about 2 weeks away from 7 years. I would like drink and smoke weed, and it was almost every day. But like the smoke weed part, I mean, now I'm admitting it to this podcast has been heard in like over 100 countries, like all over the world. And normally that's not something that I would talk about. Like when I was smoking, the only people that knew were people that I really knew, and not even all of them. Like if I would meet somebody and they would ask me if I smoked, I would say no. And then, later on I would go home and have a smoke. I didn't want people to know. Now it's become like legal or some version of legal in most states, I guess. And so it's becoming more socially acceptable, which I think is a good thing. But I don't necessarily think it's a good thing to be smoking. And then as far as the drinking goes, I was going to do a show on it. Maybe this will be that show because it kind of keeps popping up. I think I'll change the name of the show. I've done a couple on the Path Notes of the Skeptical Mystic. So I've done 2 of those. So I think this will be, I'm going to give this show a nice long title. I think it'll be the 3rd of the Path Notes of the Skeptical Mystic, Becoming an Elder. Okay. And then Fitness and Consciousness, episode 116, I think it is. So the name will be almost as long as the whole show. So here's my I quit drinking story. I'm drinking some sage tea, sage and spearmint. And to get like in the mood for the podcast, to set the tone, I burned sage. I have sage that 2 friends gave me, 2 different sage bundles, and I burn some incense. And I usually have coffee, but today I chose tea. And interestingly enough, it's in this mug. It's in this I don't know what this is called. It's not a mug. It's a whatever that's called. Big glass. It's like a beer glass. It's a beer mug. George Killian's. It has a cool horse. The show is on. I don't know if you probably can't even see that. Most people just listen to the show on iTunes and stuff, but the show is also on YouTube, so you can watch me talk. And it also helps to hit subscribe. I don't talk about that kind of stuff very often. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so on Podbean. That's an app for listening to podcasts. Podbean, Bean. And Patreon, Patreon. You just go to patreon.com, type in fitness and consciousness, and you can become a patron to the show for as little as $1 per month. Anyways, so here's the story of how I quit drinking and smoking weed. And so at the time, this was 7 years ago, and you could go back farther than that. And I guess I started smoking weed and drinking in high school, maybe even something in junior high. I don't remember exactly. And there were times I'd quit for a year or 6 months or whatever. There were some of those times. But at the time of just over 7 years ago, up until 7 years ago, it was pretty much every day. And maybe it would be like just a beer or two at night. And I would get I drank like oatmeal stouts, and like these were usually like good high-end beers. I might pay $12 for a 6-pack or something like that. And sometimes I would get a fifth of whiskey and drink quite a bit of it. So I'm not trying to make it sound like it was just a mild thing I was doing, although for the most part it was, or it wasn't. Depends how you think about it. But this was pretty much every day. I was driving a cab, and I was reading. I would read like these spiritual books about yoga, qigong, spirituality from all over the world, all these ancient traditions, and I kept reading about like drinking. Like there was like some qigong books in particular. When I was reading, there was this guy. He was already a qigong master. I think maybe he was in his 50s or so, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But it came to a point where his teacher told him, if you want to get to the highest level, you have to quit drinking, period. He says, now you can go on doing what you're doing. You're still a master. You're still a good teacher. You can stay at this level and do what you're doing, still drink and have fun, do what you want to do like that. Or you can quit drinking and get to the highest levels. And so I'm having these kind of influences. Well, what level do I want to get to? I want to get to the highest level. So does that mean I got to quit drinking? I think you're thinking about it, and weeks go by, months go by, years go by. And so I'm driving the cab, and I get a call. She called into dispatch, and I go and picked her up, and she sat in the back, and I took her to work. She worked at a bank. And it was maybe like a 15-minute drive, something like that. And then like a couple weeks later, I think it was, she called my cell phone for a ride. Instead of calling in a dispatch, she called me personally. And I remembered her. I picked her up at her apartment. She sits in the front seat, which was not an unusual thing. Some people sat in the front. Most of the time, people sat in back, but she sat in the front. And right away, we would start talking about spiritual stuff and her Earth story, as I call it, was she was from India and she was living here in Indianapolis, and she was in an arranged marriage. She worked at a bank, lived in this apartment, and if her husband took her to work, she would only get there 10 minutes early. But instead, she was paying for the cab. And so she was like under a lot of control by her husband. Like, she wasn't allowed to go places without him. And so at the time when we had the cab, the cab had like it didn't use the internet for its signal to like read the credit cards. It used something else. But so when we'd get to her work, sometimes her credit card wouldn't work, and she didn't have cash to pay. And I said, "That's fine. Don't worry about it." The next day, same thing. Next day, same thing. To and from work, and these are like somewhere around $15 trips. And this goes on for months. And we would get in, we'd talk about spiritual things. I knew she didn't drink. She seemed to be just like perfect. She seemed to know everything about spirituality. And I would ask her like if she liked any particular guru in particular, and she's like, "No, they're all the same." And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of believe it's similar. I like reading different ones." And at the time, I was reading about Osho, and I had some Osho books under my console. And she said, "Oh, my husband was a student of Osho, and like a devotee. Like he went there or like was actually with Osho, doing stuff." And she did not seem impressed at all, but not in a like cynical way, not in a negative way. It was just like she just knows better, but she didn't like know better in some egotistical way. It was just like it was very just real and pure. See, at the time I'm reading these like spiritual books, and I was also reading like some Ram Dass, and Ram Dass, one of his books, or maybe more, but at least one of them, he was talking about how when he was a professor at Harvard, and then he discovers LSD, goes to India, sees their map of the mind, has a guru, and he's like, "Well, what am I doing now? I can't go back and teach that same stuff anymore." He got kicked out. He got fired. Anyways, and so he's like, "What am I going to do?" And his idea was to become a limo driver. And that way, when he was waiting for people, he would be able to read spiritual books. And I was driving a cab, not a limo, but that's what I did. While I was waiting for people, I was reading spiritual books. And I'm reading a book about a guy that is talking about doing the same thing. And Ram Dass is my favorite, probably. I don't worship him as a guru or anything, but as far as guru goes, he does. I think he's the coolest. I like his groovy way of speaking, and it's good. He makes a lot of sense to me. So anyway, I knew that she didn't drink, and we were having all these spiritual conversations. And, if you've ever seen the show Touched by an Angel, it was like that, what happened. And so I'm reading about, if you want to get to the highest levels, you have to stop drinking. And she was like this I hesitate to even say this because I don't know if people are going to understand what I really mean. But she was like in the perfect form to transmit the pure teaching of this to me. And not just like read it in a book, oh, you got to stop drinking it to the highest level. Now you can repeat that. And now you know that. Like her, she was in the perfect form to get this through to me. And she never talked about it. She never told me I should quit drinking. And besides, I think I asked her if she did drink and she said no. I don't know if that might have been all that we ever talked about it. And so there were a couple of things. I was blown away by her from the beginning, really. But like one thing was, okay, yeah, she's from India, and I've known quite a few people from India, and they, even in the summertime, they'd want the windows up, air conditioner off. They didn't even really want the fan on. Okay, I don't know what it is, but that's like this Indian thing. That was a common thing. But her, so she was like the same way. But if it was about to rain or just finished raining, she wanted all the windows down, and she would just like lay her head back in just bliss, like just ecstatic bliss. And like, okay, this is cool. And she would just do that. So if it's 95 degrees, sun's blistering hot, windows are up, air conditioner's off. If it's about to rain, just finished raining, all the windows are down, she's laid back like in bliss. There was a time I was dropping her off at her apartment, and it was after one of these particularly hot days of not raining, so the windows are up, and I think it was like 95 degrees, whatever it was, hot Indiana summer. And we get back to her apartment, and sometimes we talk for a little bit. So we were talking for like 20 minutes at her apartment outside, and I'm just pouring sweat. My shirt's soaked. I'm dripping. And I'm looking at her, and she's like, there's not one single drop of sweat. No hint of sweat, discomfort anywhere. And I'm hot. But I'm in kind of this altered state just being around her. And it kind of like showed me like something's different here. Something's different. Like, yeah, a lot of people from India, they want the windows up in the summer. They don't want the air conditioner on. That's not uncommon. But something was different. And around the same time, I remember watching this documentary. Supposedly there was this kid that in India somewhere, a real young kid, but he's supposed to be maybe a Buddha. And he was like meditating out by a tree, and like different monks would go out, and people were checking him out because like supposedly he's not eating, supposedly this, and people were going out. And there was this older monk, looked to be in his 70s maybe. He goes out and he sits in meditation in front of the kid. And it's cold out, I believe. And there was the kid, there started to be a drop of sweat. Yeah, it was definitely cold. That's why the sweat was a thing. So it was cold out where they were. And the kid made a drop of sweat come down his head. And the old monk was saying, yeah, that's legit. He's like, we were competing. And so the old monk was saying that the kid is legit. So it kind of reminded me of that, how, kind of the opposite. I'm drenched sweat, and she's showing me no sweat. I remember when she opened the door to the 95-degree weather, it was like this rush of tundra air coming in. It's like, oh, it's cold. It's only 95 out there. So one of the next times I picked her up, I take her to work. I was picking her up, taking her to and from work pretty much almost every day, 5 days a week for a few months. And we get to her work, and remember, her credit card thing doesn't work. It's not because of her credit card, it's because of the old thing that we were using to transmit the signal. And we get there, and she hands me this big wad of cash, a bunch of ones and fives. And I didn't count it or anything. She hands it to me, and she said that she was saving her Jimmy John's money. So she's not really allowed to have her own money. She's not really allowed to go do stuff by herself, but I guess her husband lets her get Jimmy John's carry out. And so she was stashing away some money, and she gave it to me. And I didn't count it. I tried to even refuse it at first, and she's like, no, it's okay. So I took it. And then there was a time not long after that, and I'm dropping her off at her apartment. And when she's walking up, the best way I can describe it is I was able to see my potential. And I, so I'm going home, and I knew I had to quit drinking and smoking. I had like a beer left and a half a joint left. I went home, I smoked the half a joint, and I drank most of the beer. I guess I fell asleep, and I woke up, and when I woke up, I knocked the beer over, and it smelled so horrible. It was like a million rotten beers just invading my senses. It was so nasty, like a million times exaggerated. And that was the last time I ever drank. And that was July 3rd, 7 years ago. I never saw her again. No phone call. She didn't call me. I never got a call to. That was it. I never saw her again. Never heard from her again. It's like if you see that show Touched by an Angel, that's kind of how that works. Is the angels in the shows like Roma Downey and I can't remember the other star of the show's name right now, but they somebody in some town somewhere needs to make some change in their life, so the angels show up, and they end up in different kind of roles. So maybe an angel is working as a waitress because they have to like get into this person's life somehow, or maybe they're in whatever role they need to be to meet somebody and change their life. And then after that change is made, they're off. They're off to the next one. So it was like, this is what that was like. I've tried looking her up on Facebook, Instagram, nothing. And I didn't do anything weird like stalk her work or anything like that to see if she still works there. But like, there's part of me that kind of wanted to. I mean, not to be like creepy stalker guy, but just like, was that real? What part of that was real and what part of it wasn't? Was that all real? Because there was like no craving, no nothing. And so from like piecing what happened together, it was like, okay, she had like this earth story. But it was like when I say that like she worked at a bank, I mean I was really taking her to the bank. When I say she was from India, she looked like it. I mean, it didn't take a genius to figure out it. She looked like she was from India. When I say that she was in an arranged marriage, okay, they still have those in India. Okay. But that's almost those facts don't seem, I almost feel like I'm lying about those. But when I say that I think she was like an angel or a Bodhisattva, that I feel is like those are solid facts. Like that's what's real. Her working at a bank? What are you talking about working at a bank? It's crazy. Or from India? What? It's crazy. What are you talking about? So the things that seem like they would be like easy to accept as truth to me are the ones that are sound kind of fishy. But if I say like I think she was an angel or a bodhisattva, it's like, yes, obviously, that's a fact. That's just how it is. And so, it hadn't even been that long since I tried looking her up. I tried looking her up the other day. Every once in a while, I just kind of wonder. Like I was talking about that, the qigong teacher talking to his teacher. Is he talking about getting to the next level? You got to quit drinking to get to the next level as a selfish thing. Like, what's the next level? Okay, so you can think of it as, okay, this thing's for myself, but what about it? Well, he's a teacher. So maybe he can teach better. Maybe he can influence people better, not by like lecturing people about not drinking, but just by not drinking. Because sometimes what happens is when we quit drinking, we don't have as many people to hang out with because the people that drink, they want to go out drinking. And so if you're not one of those people that goes out drinking, why do they want to hang out with you? Why do they want you there? That happens. There's people that I haven't hung out with since I quit, even though I asked them to do other stuff. And when I go with people to concerts and stuff and they drink, I don't care. Uh, but it is kind of cool to go with someone that doesn't drink. That's cool too, especially if it's like a date. So if I'm going with a buddy to a concert and he drinks a beer, I'm not. It doesn't spoil my time or anything. I don't really care. But if it's gonna be like a date or something, and it's like, eh. And what's interesting, like I'm on this dating app, Bumble, and it's one where the woman has to send the first message. So if you swipe left or right, if you both match up, then the woman has 24 hours to send a message, and she has to send the first one. But so many of those profiles, they have pictures holding a beer, a martini, whatever it is, or what those tequila things, like whatever it is that people drink. Like you can tell it's obviously an alcoholic drink, or like their glass of wine. So you scroll to one, and she's in this nice dress and she's holding a glass of wine. Swipe left. Here's one, and she's holding a glass of beer at a country concert. Okay, swipe left. Here's another one. She's at some restaurant drinking a giant. I wish I could remember what those drinks are called. They have like different colors, I think, like red and blue or something. They have tequila in them. Margarita. Like some giant like margarita, and okay, swipe left. And then there's one. They're at a bar, and like taking a shot. So it's like each one like showing their like lifestyle. You have fancy dress. You have boots, cut off shorts, and a tank top, and big cup of beer. You have shots. It's like they're showing like their lifestyle through drinking. There was like this friend of mine, like he is a good friend of an ex-girlfriend of mine. I only met him a few times, but we went to his place for this art thing, and there was a sign on his wall, and it said like something like wine, and it says like how classy people get wasted. And I thought that was pretty funny. But anyways, so what does this have to do with Path Notes of the Skeptical Mystic? Okay, so I'm pretty sure I'm renaming the show to that. Sometimes I have to get through them to like start talking to like figure out the names. But as I go through and I'm wanting to, teach people, whether it's about fitness, consciousness, I've done, some stuff like on male vitality. I'm tempted somewhat to like teach more of that, but I've erased a couple of like 3 videos. They're each with other people that I did that talked about that kind of stuff. But I guess I can just be more useful. So yeah, like drinking, maybe it's in moderation. It's not bad for you, probably. Depends what you're drinking, I guess, how much, or by the individual. But just to have something like where you like have that need for something like that. And I think when we can help people most, when we can like settle back down to our center. Before the show, I wrote out a list of stuff that I was working on. It's a hell of a list. So it's like, I want to get better at playing guitar. I've been playing since I was 13. I'm 40. I want to get better at singing. I want to get better at martial arts. I do practice. So I was looking into like other jiu-jitsu classes, Muay Thai classes. I've been practicing martial arts for a long time, but I'm still looking into like other people to learn from. Capoeira. I want to get better at my nature awareness, understanding like my plant identification for its edible plants, learn about tracking, just so I can see what's going on out in the woods better, get a better read of my surroundings. I want to learn better like bird language. I want to, what else is on the list? Okay, so with my business, I want to learn how to advertise better. So like what's advertising? It's like presenting my business in a way that's easy to understand in a short amount of time, like what I can offer. videos. I'm going to start recording and selling videos of my programs, my my techniques, my style, my system. I'm learning somebody else's system. My business gym partner is Valery Fedorenko, world champion kettlebell lifter. I'm learning from him. I was learning from him today, so I want to learn his system. I'm also developing more of my own stuff, but I'm learning from him. If you have a guy that has the most records, world records, then I'd say learn what you can. And so I'm doing that. And with the podcast, I'm working on the craft of that. The list goes on and on and on and on. It's like, what are you working on? Okay. Is there just like one thing on your list? Oh, I just need to get better at this. This is all I'm working on. Oh, dishes, keeping up with my dishes better. There's like a few dishes in there that I should probably just get in the habit of washing dishes more. Oh, there's a mug over there. I should get better at tidying up as I go. And there's all these things that scatter our focus. Okay, so if we're like drinking or smoking weed, is that something that you can really like focus, help you focus? It scatters the focus. So I think if we can simplify as much as possible, prioritize as much as possible, maybe is a better way to put it, then we can help ourselves more and help other people more. And that seems to be what it's all about. So when I talked about, like, I like connecting people. So one of my clients had an issue like with her hip, sometimes her like lower back, like one side of her lower back, more like in her hip. And so I would like change if something was hurting, I would change the technique, do a variation of it or whatever. And then she could do that one and it wouldn't hurt that day. And it wasn't something that was consistent over time. It seemed like different things hurt at different times. Sometimes it would be fine. Sometimes it wouldn't. And I've been a trainer for a long time. But then I have a physical therapist friend who I met somewhat recently. She should be on the podcast in the next several weeks or so. I'm not sure exactly when. I was like, okay, I'm going to refer my client to her. And so she went there yesterday. And when my friend called me, she said, oh, she was the perfect client for me. We did this and this. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, oh, that's really great. You know, what was a mystery to me was obvious to her. And then, you know, she's telling me, well, you see things that I won't. You know, so it's not like she's just better at me at everything. It's like, okay, she's a physical therapist. So maybe if you're wanting, you know, like, it's like they deal with like pain and stuff. Okay, so that's, you know, the main thing. It's a medical thing. So I didn't go to school to be a physical therapist. I've read a lot, and some of the people that I follow and study are physical therapists that try to kind of bridge the gap between trainer and therapist. But nobody knows everything. And she's been to other therapists that didn't seem to get anywhere. And so hopefully this worked out. Everybody has like a specialty. So I like to be able to connect, make that connection like that. And, you know, I've gotten some messages. And like I thought, okay, like once a month at my gym, I'm going to invite several friends to come by the gym, and we'll have like coffee, tea, talk. If people want to like lift some kettlebells or do whatever, show off whatever moves they're working on, can do that. But just kind of like talk, hang out, connect. Not everybody knows each other, and maybe we'll just do that once a month. And I got a message the other day from one of the guys that I invited. We've never hung out one-on-one or anything. He's been to my classes. He's brought his son to my classes. But he sent me like some message. It was like some meme. I forget exactly what it was, but I sent him a message back. It was like something about connecting or something. I don't remember. But I sent him a message back, reminding about, if you want to, we try to get out to the woods and climb around. We try to, I'm thinking of having like this coffee and pals kind of thing where people come in, hang out. And then his response is, yes, I need more of that in my life. I need more of that, connecting with people and this kind of thing. Like, cool. And, other friends of mine, they say have said the same thing. I don't want to say their names. I don't want to make it sound weird like that. But other friends of mine are the same thing, that they're hitting me up, and I'm like, cool. I've been wanting to get hold of you to hang out more too, and I want to get out and do more stuff with friends and they're saying the same thing. So it seems like maybe there's a part in our lives when we get to be a certain age, maybe like in high school, for most people, it's like easy to have a bunch of friends. You go somewhere where there's 1,000 people every day and like, oh, that guy kind of dresses like me. I bet we can be friends. Or that girl seems like, and you're just around all these people all the time. It's a social environment, but maybe you go to work and you're not working with people that would necessarily be in your kind of friend group, and it's not a very social environment. Or maybe your life is like you're working on your business, you don't have that same be around so many people all the time. So I think we get to a point in our lives where we kind of look around and it's like, I've been working so hard, I've neglected my relationships, and I'm paying the price for that. And so are the people that I would be having these relationships with. And so that's one thing that I want to get better at. That's on the list, along with guitar and singing and all these martial arts and the business stuff. It's relationships. So I'm a single guy. I'm not seeing anyone right now. There may be someone I'm interested in. I don't know. I'm pretty open right now. But just like having like some dudes to hang out with, and or whoever, just friends, girls, guys, whoever that just like want to go out. And so we had a cool bunch of people that we were in the habit of going out to the woods. Like it might have been like once a week or every other week. And there'd be several of us out there just climbing around, and it was really fun, and kind of got away from that. But so as an elder, what do you do to help facilitate that? Well, you invite people to stuff. Like you have a group, start your group. There isn't one. Okay, so you say, okay, well, once a month we're getting together. If it's nice out, we're meeting at the park. If it's raining, we'll meet at my house, or we can take turns meeting at these different places, but this group of people will try to get together the first Sunday of the month or whatever, and see what happens, because it's like these magical things. You never regret it. Never regret it. We go out to the woods. We're lifting rocks and squatting logs, and we're doing all kinds of fun stuff, climbing, jumping, balancing, and it's like this high. It's so fun. It's such these like meaningful experiences, and that's what people are craving. These kind of connections that's not just like sit somewhere and dull your senses, sit somewhere and play video games or watch movies or TV shows or something like that. That can all be fine too, but I'm talking about getting out and doing. I have a bunch of trainer friends. We all have different strengths. So maybe I'm lifting the biggest weight overhead, but I'm not climbing the tree like Joey can climb the tree. I'm climbing the tree, but he goes up higher. He's doing different stuff. I'm jumping from that log to that. We're both jumping around, but he's better at this. I'm better at that. Somebody else is better at something else. And it's all just this really encouraging thing. And maybe somebody else is just kind of like more like walking along and having fun. And they're just like doing what they do. So you don't it's not like a competition. It's inspiring, but it's not. It's a healthy thing. Are you following me? Do you get what I'm saying here? What I've been doing on the show also is I had that first part picked out. I've had this Jim Morrison book, Wilderness, for a while from the library. And it's, I don't know what to think about it. It's called Wilderness, but I don't know if it has much to do with. I'll just read randomly. I am troubled immeasurably by your eyes. I am struck by the feather of your soft reply. The sound of glass speaks quick disdain and conceals what your eyes fight to explain. And I came to you for peace, and I came to you for gold, and I came to you for lies, and you gave me fever and wisdom and cries of sorrow. And we'll be here the next day, and tomorrow. There's a belief by the children of man which states all will be well. Search on man, calm savior, veteran of wars incalculable, greed. Search on man, calm savior, Godspeed and forgive you, morning star, fragrant, meadow person girl. An explosion of birds, dawn. Sun strokes the walls. An old man leaves the casino. A young man reading pauses on the path to the garden. A quality of ignorance, self-deception may be necessary to the poet's survival. I like the Doors. Some of his writings were not quite what I expected or what I was hoping for. It's maybe it's not the depth that I was hoping for. This is A Storm in the Mountains by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I have not read this. So one of the things on the show, I was doing random Rumi readings, Well, I had to take all my Rumi books back to the library. And sometimes before the shows, I would just comb through a bunch of books and pick out different poems and paragraphs here and there to read. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll just kind of start doing more random stuff and see what happens. A Storm in the Mountains, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It caught us one pitch black night at the foot of the pass. We crawled out of our tents and ran for shelter as it came towards us over the ridge. Everything was black, no peaks, no valleys, no horizon to be seen, only the searing flashes of lightning separating darkness from light, and the gigantic peaks of Bilaya Kaya and Jaguturlu sorry, looming up out of the night. The huge black pine trees around us seemed as high as the mountains themselves. For a split second, we felt ourselves on terra firma. Then once more, everything would be plunged into darkness and chaos. The lightning moved on, brilliant light alternating with pitch blackness, flashing white, then pink, then violet. The mountains and pines always springing back in the same place, their hugeness filling us with awe, yet when they disappeared, we could not believe that they had ever existed. The voice of the thunder filled the gorge, drowning the ceaseless roar of the rivers. Like the arrows of Sabaoth, the lightning flashes rained down on the peaks, then split up into serpentine streams as though bursting into spray against the rock face, or striking and then shattering like a living thing. As for us, we forgot to be afraid of the lightning, the thunder, and the downpour, just as a droplet in the ocean has no fear of a hurricane. Insignificant yet grateful, we became part of this world, a primal world in creation before our eyes. That was somewhat not the same, but in this has something to do with that first thing I read. The Dalliance of the Eagles by Walt Whitman. Skirting the river road, my forenoon walk, my rest. Skyward in air, a sudden muffled sound, the dalliance of the eagles. The rushing amorous contact high in space together. The clenching interlocking claws, a living, fierce, gyrating wheel. 4 beating wings, 2 beaks, a swirling mass, tight, grappling. In tumbling, turning, clustering loops, straight, downward falling, till over the river poised, the twain, yet one, a moment's lull. A motionless, still balance in the air, parting, talons loosening. Upward again on slow, firm pinions, slanting, their separate, diverse flight, she, hers, he, his, pursuing. It's from 1880. It's been a while since I read from Prophet Khalil Gibran. I'll pick one randomly out of here too, I think. Then Almitra spoke again and said, "And what of marriage, master?" And he answered, saying, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. Aye, you shall be together even in the silent memory of God. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. It's pretty cool. It's interesting. So how are your relationships? What do you, like if your romantic relationship with friends, how much of your disdain was the first word I thought of. I wondered if that was the right word. How much of your troubled mind do you just keep a secret to keep the peace? How much do you just not mention the problems that you really have? And do you see there's a balance of how much you should let out and keep in? I think what I've done for however many of my past relationships, I tend to try not to cause any trouble. I try to, if something's going on that I don't really like, usually not even mention it. I'd usually just deal with it in my mind. So so then when we could be together, we were just, enjoy that time, because you don't know what's next. Could die on their way home. So do you want to spend your last moment having some argument over something petty? You're not guaranteed tomorrow. But does that mean that you just put up with something just to keep the whole thing alive? Now, I was talking about the angel or the Bodhisattva that led me to quit drinking without even saying a word about it. I kind of wondered, it's like weird, like to even think about. So if she was in this arranged marriage and she even referred to herself as a housewife. She had a full-time job. See over there, some of the, I guess it can be similar to stuff over here too. But arranged marriages are still very common. And I had a friend, first time he ever saw his wife was at the wedding. They were from India. Never saw her before. The parents orchestrated this whole thing. You get there, oh hi, I guess I'm your husband now. I asked him, I was like, well, what if she didn't like you? He's like, well, that's the point. Why wouldn't she like me? Like, he was a really cool guy. But it's just a different way of thinking, isn't it? So I could see her in this. I usually don't take this angle. I usually don't admit a lot of this kind of stuff about it, because I don't want the point of the story to be mistaken. It's not easy to understand the story. It's not easy. I don't know that body can really get it if I explain too much. But so I see her in like this relationship where she's not allowed to go anywhere without her husband. Like, what? You know, when I'm seeing someone, and they want to go, she wants to go hang out with her friends or whatever, and not invite me. Cool. I'm going to go to my buddies and watch the UFC. I'm going to, whatever. Completely, if I don't trust somebody, I'm not going to stay with them. So it's not a matter of like that. It's like, oh, you want to go? Sure. Like, yeah, go do whatever you want. And then I'll go do whatever I want. We'll come back. We missed each other, and that's good. But I couldn't imagine. So I see her in this kind of thing where she's not even supposed to have her own money. Full-time job. And she's not even supposed to have money. And so she had to like sneak me this handful of cash from her Jimmy John's takeout carry or Jimmy John's delivery or what. And I'm thinking, is that how you want to spend your life? And I was trying at the time to very subtly, very, very, very carefully tiptoe into that subject, just barely. Yeah, I don't want to say any more about it. But it's kind of weird, like even think about that, because that part of it doesn't even seem real. If I say, like, I think she was an angel or Bodhisattva, so it was just like a story. It's like, it's like when you're watching Touched by an Angel, the TV show, and you see an angel working as a waitress to get into this person's life. Don't get hung up on them like, oh, why are you a waitress? Don't you? She's not really a waitress. She's working. Yeah, she's a waitress, but she's not. It's not really what's happening. You know what I'm saying? Probably not, because there's a lot of that I have to keep quiet. But what I said is the truth. I think I will. I have a couple copies of the Tao Te Ching here. I opened it up to chapter 50. When one is out of life, one is in death. The companions of life are 13. The companions of death are 13. And when a living person moves into the realm of death, his companions are also 13. How is this? Because he draws upon the resources of life too heavily. It is said that he who knows well how to live meets no tigers or wild buffaloes on his road and comes out from the battleground untouched by the weapons of war. For in him a buffalo would find no butt for his horns, a tiger nothing to lay his claws upon, and a weapon of war no place to admit its point. How is this? Because there is no room for death in him. "19. Drop wisdom, abandon cleverness, and the people will be benefited 100-fold. Drop humanity, abandon justice, and the people will return to their natural affections. Drop shrewdness, abandon sharpness, and robbers and thieves will cease to be. These three are the crisscross of Tao and are not sufficient in themselves. Therefore, they should be subordinated to a higher principle. See the simple and embrace the primal, diminish the self and curb the desires." Does that have anything to do with what we're talking about here? So what do you think you should make the priority in your life? We're all so busy. How can you make yourself like less busy but more productive? How can you better reach your goals and help people more, be there as a friend for more people, and have relationships that are good where you're an asset and not a liability to these things? And do you believe when I tell you that there was an angel or a Bodhisattva or something other than a human that popped into my life and made a change just like she? And if you don't believe it, could it be because you just never had that happen? Or have you had that happen, but you don't want to believe it? Which I think might be closer to the case for some people. Say, open your mind, open your possibility to the miracles. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.